Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Dr. Jeannie Callum, and her talk is called Delivering Blood Transfusions with Pit Stop Precision.
You're out on the lake. It's a beautiful, sunny February morning, and you're snowmobiling with your friends. It's a perfect day. And then you hear a loud noise. And you look over, and one of your friends has been thrown off his snowmobile. It's Andrew. He's a father of 3. You realize he's driven too close to the shore, and he's hit a dock hidden underneath the snow, and he's been thrown against an exposed rock. By the time you get over to him, he's already unconscious, and he's bleeding. I'm going to tell you about our research journey to find the best blood transfusion recipe for patients like Andrew. And I'm going to tell you about how our blood transfusion innovations saved Andrew's life. I'm Jeannie, and I'm a hematologist and a transfusion medicine researcher at Queen's University, but I come from a long line of engineers, finance, and math types. But when I was growing up, my family used to always say, "Oh, we haven't had a doctor in the family since your great-grandfather graduated from Queen's Medicine in 1905. You should be a doctor." Given our lack of primary care physicians, perhaps it's not such a crazy rule that every 100 years, every family has to cough up a doctor. So medicine it was, but I'm going to tell you about how I'm re-engineering the delivery of blood to bleeding patients. Before I can start my talk tonight, I need to explain 3 words I'm going to use. The first is bleeding. We all bleed now and then. A paper cut, a nosebleed. Oh, I'm not talking about that kind of bleeding. I'm talking about the kind of bleeding where you lose all of your blood in under an hour. We each have a precious 5 liters of blood. Makes us pink, delivers oxygen to our brains, and keeps our heart pumping. Without it, the lights go out. The second term is clotting. We each have 13 proteins in our blood that somehow magically sense a breach in a torn blood vessel at sites of injury and form a mesh across the gaps to stop the bleeding. You can think of a clot as a biological Band-Aid. When our patients bleed, their clotting factor levels drop. So we transfuse them clotting factors from our blood donors to return the levels to normal to stop the bleeding. The third term is the blood bank. The first blood bank was opened by Dr. Bernard Fantis at the Cook County Hospital in Chicago in 1937. He called it the Blood Preservation Laboratory, but his daughter Ruth thought the name was a bit stiff, and she suggested the blood bank. The name stuck. And so now, in every hospital across the world, there is a blood bank. It's about the size of this room. It's full of fridges, freezers, and blood incubators, and over 500 blood products. The room is cold, has a loud hum because of all these equipment. And the phone is constantly ringing because the nurses are calling down to say, "Where's my blood?" The blood bank is overseen by about 16 amazing blood bank technologists that cover the lab 24/7 in rotating shifts. If you're an exceptional multitasker, you thrive on chaos and adrenaline, this is the job for you. The blood bank is like a busy kitchen in a restaurant on New Year's Eve, with people preparing unique recipes for each customer. Except the risks are much higher. If they get the recipe wrong or they're too slow, their customer dies. On top of this regular level of noise and chaos, about once every 3 days, there's a hospital announcement overhead, code transfusion. That means someone in the hospital is massively bleeding. In this case, our snowmobiler Andrew has just arrived by ambulance, and he's massively bleeding. The overhead announcement is to tell everybody else in the hospital that the blood bank technologists are exceptionally busy right now. They need to focus solely on Andrew's blood preparation to save his life. Don't bother them because every minute counts. The first hour of major bleeding we call the golden hour. If care isn't perfect in that first 60 minutes, the patient's more likely to die. The term golden hour was coined by military surgeon Dr. Adams Cowley after he analyzed data from soldiers in World War I, comparing those that lived to died. In his words, there is a golden hour between life and death. If you are critically injured, you have less than 60 minutes to survive. You might not die right then, might be 3 days or 2 weeks later, but something has happened in your body in that first 60 minutes that's irreparable. Bleeding is a major healthcare problem worldwide. During tonight's 2-hour event, 130 people across the world will experience a preventable bleeding death just from trauma in childbirth. 1 human every minute. Most of them will be young. For those of you in the audience so fortunate to be under the age of 45, this is your most common cause of death. We wonder why you don't drive, cycle, and walk more carefully. 60,000 women bleed to death across the planet every year from childbirth. 1 new mom every 8 minutes. The other group of patients that keep us up at night because they're bleeding are patients having cardiac surgery. Cardiac surgery is a common procedure that we do, and 1 in 4 patients experience serious bleeding. Even within the golden hour, the speed matters. Every 1 minute delay to transfusion increases your chance of death by 5%. So you won't be surprised that if your trauma happens at a distance from a trauma hospital, you're 2 times more likely to die. The paramedics target no more than 10 minutes at the roadside, and they drive as fast as possible to get you to the closest trauma center. They drive past other hospitals without trauma facilities to get you there. And in that golden hour, your healthcare team must do 3 things. Start transfusing, give a pro-clotting drug, and give clotting factors. I know what it should look like. Have you ever seen a Formula 1 pit stop? These teams practice their choreography over and over again to shave fractions of seconds off of their time. They change 4 tires, realign the vehicle, add fuel, and get the car out in under 12 seconds. Blood transfusion in major bleeding needs to be as fast and as choreographed as this, but honestly, we're not even close. Can you imagine if one of those cars came in to the pit stop and it was only then that they ran back to the depot to get the fuel? We all know that that team is going to lose. And with that in mind, let me tell you about what bleeding resuscitation used to look like. Let's consider a snowmobiler that was injured and cared for a decade ago. His friends call 911. It's 7 minutes till the paramedics get there. They leave the scene 8 minutes later. It's a 25-minute drive to the closest trauma center. We're now at 40 minutes into the golden hour. We have 20 minutes left to do those 3 things. Nurses are super fast. They manage to get the blood into that patient at 58 minutes. But it's not till 78 minutes, 18 minutes too late, that they give that pro-clotting drug. And it's not until 120 minutes that he managed to get clotting factors. But by this point, his clotting factors have already failed him. He's profusely bleeding. In transfusion medicine, this is what we call too little, too late. We can't blame his healthcare team. We can't blame the blood bank technologists. Our clotting factors are frozen in these giant freezes, and we can't thaw them till we hear that overhead announcement, code transfusion. The blood has to be refrigerated and monitored, and it's a 10-minute run for the porter from the emergency department. So instead of just pumping in high-octane fuel, like in a Formula 1 pit stop, a call comes from the emergency department. We have a code transfusion. The blood bank technologist issues Group O universal blood to the porter who runs it to the emergency department. And then your blood bank technologist takes your clotting factors out of the freezer, but they take 45 minutes to prepare. But 1 in 4 of our trauma patients, at arrival, their clotting factors are already at failure point, and many of the patients will die before they get the opportunity to get clotting factors. Over the last decade, we have been researching every part of this transfusion recipe. And it truly is a blood recipe, and we have been investigating every part of it. we have to test each part of it in a clinical trial before we can integrate it into a larger protocol. Let me tell you about my journey to try and figure some of this out. And I'm going to give you 4 examples about how my research is speeding up the delivery of blood to bleeding patients and finding the best recipe to stop bleeding. Let's start with the first problem about getting the blood into the patient faster. I had the fortunate placement of my office halfway between the trauma bay and the blood bank. And for years, I watched the porters running back and forth with these heavy cases of blood. I tried putting a blood fridge in the emergency department, but units of blood kept going missing. For a long time, I was sure that one of our emergency department physicians who'd been training for an Ironman was taking those units to improve his athletic performance. But it turned out to be just well-meaning residents grabbing units for a bleeding patient that was somewhere else in the hospital. The solution to this problem turned out to be a blood vending machine, kind of like a junk food vending machine. So with a fridge manufacturer in Italy, software developers in Vancouver, a venture capitalist in the United Kingdom, because of course you always need money, process engineers, implementation specialists, blood transfusion technologists, and blood transfusion physicians, and a very generous grant from the Ministry of Health of Ontario, we implemented and validated the first vending machines for blood. I put cameras on top of these vending machines to see where the users were getting stuck so we can continuously optimize the screens to cut the transaction times. We got it down to 26 seconds. So from 10 minutes to blood to 26 seconds. Since those first few prototypes were put into a couple of hospitals in the UK and Canada, there are now 706 blood vending machines in trauma bays, emergency departments, and operating rooms around the world. From 10 minutes to 26 seconds, and we have controls on the units of blood to keep them safe until they're ready for transfusion. The second thing we had to figure out was how to get that pro-clotting drug into you within the golden hour. It's called tranexamic acid. It's cheap, costs $10 a patient. This drug protects your clotting factors and stabilizes your clots. When a 20,000 patient study showed that it saved lives, we sent an email out to all of our emergency department physicians telling them they needed to give it. But we did an audit just to make sure 100% were getting it in the golden hour. 10% were getting it around 3 hours from injury. So that taught me, if you have something important to say, do not say it by email. But I didn't give up. I trained, I retrained, I put up posters to remind them. I simplified the infusion they give in the trial to make it easier. I audited and re-audited. Then I made every hospital in Ontario input their time to tranexamic acid in our provincial massive hemorrhage database. We got to 60% in the golden hour. It was at this point that I realized to get it into you within the golden hour, I needed to give it to you before you got to the hospital. When you're coming in by ambulance, the paramedics start this bag of fluid. I needed to figure out how to get the drug into the fluid so that by the time you rolled into the emergency department, the drug would be in you. Not so easy. In healthcare, we're actually really afraid of new things. This drug had the word acid in it. Some of the doctors were afraid this pro-clotting drug would cause strokes. It doesn't. And the paramedics had a really important concern. They already had a lot to do to you on the way to the trauma center. So with a group of researchers from the United States and Canada, we randomized 1,300 trauma patients to getting the drug at the roadside compared to getting it after hospital arrival. And it was the conduct of that trial that proved to us that our paramedics in Ontario could give the drug, that it was safe, and it assured us we could get it into you within the golden hour. The third thing we had to figure out was the clotting factors, the giant freezies. The problem with these is it takes 45 minutes to prepare. We have to keep the clotting factors frozen to maintain their function. The blood bank technologist used to take 10 donor bags out of the freezer, put them in a water bath for 17 minutes, take them out of the water bath, add fluid to them, combine the 10 bags into the one bag, issue it to the porter, and then the porter would run it to the emergency department and the nurse would infuse it. This is not very impractical. And then in 2010, powder clotting factors became widely available, kind of like dehydrated food you might take this summer on your canoe trip. It sounded perfect. The problem was we didn't know whether or not the new powder product would be as good at stopping bleeding as the frozen product. So to answer the question, we randomized 800 bleeding patients at 11 hospitals across Canada to getting one of the two products. Half of the patients got the frozen product, half of the patients got the powder product. Turned out the new powder product was just as good at stopping bleeding, it was safer, and it reduced the cost of care. Normally, change in healthcare goes at this glacial pace. But in this case, within a few months of the results of this study being published in an academic journal, the blood bank technologists across this country had managed to swap out the old frozen for the new powdered to make your care better. The fourth thing we had to figure out was which patients needed clotting factors and which ones. Not every patient needed clotting factors. Our problem was our test for clotting took 60 minutes, the entire golden hour. The nurse would draw the sample. The porter would run it to the laboratory. In the laboratory, the technologist would process the sample, then load it on an instrument, run the test to see how long you were clotting, call your numbers to your surgeon, and then your surgeon would call the blood bank asking for a particular clotting factor. The problem is, there isn't a single surgeon on the planet that is going to stand around for the entire golden hour and watch you bleed without doing something. And this led to the common habit of just throwing every blood product at the bleeding patient in the hopes that one of them would stop the bleeding. What we needed was a way to rapidly test your blood clotting at the bedside to make faster decisions. Well, a researcher in Germany in 1948 had invented a bedside clotting test. The problem was we had never tested it head-to-head with the regular clotting tests. So under the leadership of Dr. Kevin Karkouti, who's a cardiac anesthesiologist, a great friend, and who's been along with me on this amazing research journey, we randomized 7,000 Canadians undergoing cardiac surgery to get either the old 60-minute lab test versus the new rapid bedside test. It worked. By finding out faster what was the cause of the bleeding, targeting the clotting factor replacement, the patient stopped bleeding faster. So let's go back to Andrew. How did Andrew survive? Well, Andrew was cared for in this newly designed trauma system. At 15 minutes, he gets that tranexamic acid in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. In the trauma bay, he gets blood dispensed by the vending machine at 40 minutes. The new rapid bedside test is right at his bedside and tells his clinical team exactly what clotting factors he needs. The clotting factors, the new powder ones, are prepared rapidly and infused. His blood clotting never fails. He gets all three things within the golden hour. The new system is faster and logistically less complicated for his healthcare team. 2 weeks later, Andrew's ready to go home. His wife and his kids come and pick him up. He still has a very long road to recovery, but he's alive to see his kids' next hockey game. When we think about innovation in healthcare, we usually think about exciting things. Gene therapy, novel biologics for cancer. But improving healthcare also involves re-engineering the delivery of care. Things like faster transfusion, faster testing. We've made huge strides in improving the delivery of blood to bleeding patients. By using blood vending machines, we've cut the time to transfusion from 10 minutes to 26 seconds. By giving that pro-clotting drug to you in the ambulance, we make sure it gets given in the golden hour. By transitioning from a frozen product to a powder product, we've cut the production time from 45 minutes to 5 minutes. And by bringing the laboratory testing to your bedside, we've personalized your transfusion support. So although we're not quite at the 12 seconds in the Formula One pit stop, we are so much closer to bringing all of your transfusion support into the golden hour. Over 10,000 patients participated in these trials. We cannot improve the care for future generations without research.